Hi everyone and welcome to your horoscope for the week of October 5th, 2020. This horoscope is brought to you by 1millionnights.com. We have a really active and extremely tensioned sky playing out all throughout the week. But from a certain perspective, it's nothing really new because this just continues the main theme of this autumn, more specifically the second half of August and all of September, and now we are heading strongly into October, and the sky is full of tension. The predominant celestial conversations are going to be squares, but I think the most influential energy next week is definitely going to be Pluto, because it is on the 5th of October, so the very beginning of the week, when Pluto stands still in the sky and then prepares to go direct. Now this is highly important because whenever a planet stands still in the sky, that means that it's that much closer to the Earth, to our planet, and its symbolism is greatly amplified, and usually its most darker, assertive shadow expression is what the energies are going to be playing out. And with Pluto in Capricorn, well, that is not the very best of news from any perspective, because globally speaking, well, this is where centralized power embody all their control. Basically, this is when they will start to be using like assertive force. I'm not really talking about great acts of violence, etc., as in, the military conquering and taking over and, dispersing protesters. Even though none of that is excluded whatsoever, just on a much smaller scale, without the massive damage, so to speak. But on the other hand, Pluto going direct in Capricorn, well, that represents whatever rules, regulations, tactics, centralized power wishes to implement in the present moment. Well, on one hand, it's not gonna ask anyone's opinion. It just does what it thinks it's best, and no one can really challenge it. Not physically, not legally, not constitutionally. So basically, that is the abuse of power. It is just as simple as that. A totally different layer of this energy, well, that is truth. This is where the true and deeply rooted corruption, the nepotism, the secret agendas, all the mistakes, all the flaws, all the unwise decisions are gonna start seeing daylight. Big revelations, big disclosures. For example, secret recordings, films, clips, documents being disclosed. But at the same time, it can also mean that this disclosure comes from within. Someone blows the whistle. But of course, all of this slowly but surely and gradually. And in many parts of the world, in many countries, this is already in progress. This is already happening. For example, in my own country, they just revealed that the local elections were arranged. And they have films, they have, all the evidence that anyone could possibly need. But of course, because all of our legal system is corrupt from head to toe, no one can do anything about it, except people going on the streets, but, no one actually cares about that. But if this happened in my culture, which is a Capricorn country, well then chances are something similar is about to take place also in the UK, for example, another Capricorn country. But maybe it's not going to be, the main theme is not going to be elections. Maybe it's any other symbol of centralized power, for example, NHS, or, you can interpret centralized power as you wish. Centrally, for example, government, but also locally, councils, mayor, organizations, banks, big institutions, big corporations, big pharma, naturally. Because, many astrologers don't associate Pluto with big pharma, but it does make a lot of sense, especially in the sign of Capricorn, because it's all about control, but Pluto is also the celestial alchemist, so it is about substances, etc. And alchemy, transmutation, transformation, that's basically also chemistry. So you're producing substances. And after Pluto goes direct is when the party truly starts, because now we have Jupiter, Saturn, and now also Pluto moving direct. And as Pluto moves direct, very, very soon it will reactivate 23 degrees of Capricorn, where 12th of January 2020, Saturn-Pluto conjunction took place. So another detonation of a karmic bomb. Under these circumstances, who knows how it's going to play out? Who knows what will shock us? Who knows how the change is going to be imminent? This is where it's going to be obvious to all of us. Either we change and start the change here and now, or we're going to have a really, really dark, confusing, and almost anarchy-dominated future. But this is just as intense, just as powerful for the individual as well, because that Pluto can represent that very necessary transformation in at least one area of your life. So the crisis continues, it gets deeper, it gets thicker, it goes to the core, it hits a nerve. But of course this is painful, this is uncomfortable. But on the other hand, all throughout 2020, this is what has taken place in that area of our lives where Pluto has done its activity, so to speak. So we are kind of used to it, just that this is where the show actually has to reach the culmination point. So depending on where 23rd of Capricorn falls into your chart, which area of your life, which house it affects, well, that is where you can expect really powerful, massive transformation. It can be closures, ending, losses. It can also mean taking back your power, awakening to a totally different kind of truth. This is where the blindfold is taking off your eyes, regardless if it has to do with other people, your job, career, any area of life, or simply your relations with yourself, inner truth, your wounds, traumas, because Pluto is a very strong psychological energy. It is the planet of psychoanalysis. So this is where we have absolutely no choice but to confront all those truths, may they be hurts, memories, traumas that just source and well up from within. Not to mention that this week we had on the 1st of October, this very, very, very intense Aries full moon conjunct Chiron. So that already started the inner chain reaction of truth, disillusioning, and the urgent necessity to heal ourselves. If there was a main karmic lesson here, last week and this week, well, that is very, very simple. We cannot do absolutely anything for our futures, even for the present, unless we heal, unless we approach everything, life, our jobs, our futures, anything that we like, from a place of integrity, psychological, emotional, spiritual integrity, as in when we're healed, when our wounds and traumas have no grip over us. And if they do, it is just the wisdom and the experience of it. So even though this energy is going to be really, really heavy, painful, depressive, anxious, melancholic, or full of rage, anger, and frustration for other people, it doesn't really matter, because this is the universe's way to clearly, imperatively, without any misunderstanding, telling us, you need to heal, and you need to heal right now, because if you take these wounds, all your traumas, all your hurt, all the past, into the new paradigm as after 21st of December, well, your life is going to be a never-ending nightmare, because if it is those wounds and traumas that are running your existence, your perceptions, your sense of normality, the way you consolidate your external reality, if everything is based on those, well, I'm really sorry, you cannot have not even a decent existence, because your mind will defeat you each step of the way when you will try to do something positive and good for yourself. So this is where you need to heal. It doesn't matter how. Of course, healing is a very long and delicate and complicated process. It doesn't want us to miraculously, regenerate and just rip out the traumas instantly. It just wants us to embark on a very, very serious note, as in, like, we're really gonna do this no matter what, on this healing journey. Now, of course, the year 2019 was all about this, actually. So, for those individuals who actually tapped into the wisdom of all the negativity, depressions, dramas, melancholy of 2019, well, they already embodied the lesson, and they will just know that this is the very last stepping stone when they actually enter their healed state. But for those who weren't that aware and who weren't that wise, well, this is where they have to begin the healing journey. Either way, without inner balance and without deep and profound self-knowledge, we simply cannot enter into the new paradigm, because it's going to be much more worse rather than infinitely better. And why? Well, it's very simple from an astrological perspective. Aquarius is a very powerful intellectual and mental part of the sky. Aquarius is mind over matter. And if your mind is full of negativity, suffering, the inability to forgive, attaching to regret, sorrow, what ifs, then you're gonna create that reality for yourself. And because it is a change of paradigms, things will not work as they work right now. When air energy predominates, everything is instant, including manifestation. So it's not gonna be, I'm depressed today and I just think all these self-loathing, self-hate thoughts, and it's gonna bite me in the behind after 3-4 months. It is gonna be like I'm thinking these negative thoughts and self-defeating patterns, and they defeat me there and then. So this is why the universe actually tries to motivate us to heal and regenerate and to just embody who we truly are on the soul level. For in 3 months, when Saturn meets Jupiter in Aquarius, manifestation is going to be totally different. And ironically, because everything changes, as in the whole paradigm and how, the unseen world, the world of quantum physics, the entangled particles, etc., how they react, their patterns, their normality changes, because for the last 600 years, but most 80% of the great conjunctions took place in earth signs. So that was one normality, and that normality included everything: spirituality, the way our psyches influence reality, our thoughts, etc. But now we are heading into 600 years of air great conjunctions. So everything changes, including spirituality, including manifestation, law of attraction, all of this. So basically, the big professors and teachers of the law of attraction and, all that are basically teaching you something which in 3 months is gonna be totally different. So they would need to research how things will gonna work, link together, how the quantum entanglement is gonna manifest in the new paradigm, because this knowledge that we're using right now is gonna be invalid in just 3 months. And maybe some big gurus and law of attraction and manifestation teachers are gonna laugh at me right now with tears in their eyes. But let's see in 3 months how things are going to be like. And then decide for yourself there and then. But let me give you a totally different example, because astrology basically studies the cycles. The last time we had a great conjunction in Aquarius was in the year 1000 something, when Genghis Khan entered Europe, but it opened up new trade routes connecting Asia and India to Europe. So basically, people in Europe started living a totally new paradigm, because like items, foods, materials, and even cultural, spiritual, philosophical elements entered their lives which were totally alien to them. Like imagine just a simple person, they never even suspected all throughout their lives that India or Asia or different cultures exist in the world. And even if they suspected, they would have been talking about this like we would be talking about aliens. Maybe they exist, but they're somewhere obscure, totally unreachable. But surprise, surprise, it entered their reality in a flash. And it changed their lives slowly but surely forever. And because of that, this is how we have the world with the internet, with, cultures coexisting in peace and harmony with each other. That was the main trigger. But there is, of course, a much more powerful example, but which doesn't really have to do with Aquarius, but rather the total demolition, deconstruction of this old order, Capricorn. The last time we had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, this year we had 12th of January 2020, but before that it was 504 years ago, and it coincided with the Protestant movement, where Martin Luther basically, through his gesture of rebellion, his proclamation, it took away the power of the Pope, of the institution of the Pope. This is where you no longer had to pay for the forgiveness of your sins, and neither were you forced to read the Bible or any holy text in Latin, but rather your own native tongue. And that changed the world forever. Without that, science and scientific progress, scientists, philosophies, research, etc., different opinions, as in Aquarius exactly, would still be burned on stake. So that profoundly changed everything. And this year in 2020, we have both of those big changes one after another. Just look, 12th of January, the COVID, how quickly it changed like everything profoundly. It shook us to the core. And now we have, before the Great Conjunction takes place on 21st December, we also have a really, really powerful solar eclipse in Sagittarius on the 12th of December, if I'm not mistaken. That is also a massively powerful new beginning. The South Node is there. Sagittarius is all about long distance travel, but in our modern era it can very well mean space travel, groundbreaking cosmological discoveries. It can mean a reform of spirituality, as in a total religions and even free spirituality. So very, very revolutionary, futuristic elements are going to enter our collective awareness for the first time ever. It doesn't matter if that is a groundbreaking cosmological, quantum physical, scientific discovery, everything that can be related to the sign of Sagittarius, or if it's something else, but either way it will change everything, and that eclipse is a very powerful new beginning, so it is for the better. And after we have the Great Conjunction, 0 degrees in Aquarius on the 21st of December, it's also winter solstice, so the veil between the worlds is that much thinner, and also the Great Conjunction takes place in the sky, and it's 0 degrees is always revolutionary, regardless of which sign it takes in, but it takes in the sign of revolution, visionary, the future, interhuman connection, the next new thing, Aquarius, 0 degrees, that is gonna be massive. But before we get there, we really, and I mean really have to change our ways. And we can only change by changing what is on our insides. That means our way of thinking, that means our perceptions, that means our life views and philosophies, that means our inner value system, that means the relation with the self. This is where, if we do not purge out all of those inner structures, including in our genes, so it is so very alive in every part of our beings, even physically, the predominance of the earth element, as in the greed, as in the survival mentality, as in having to be the top predator or be crushed by others, as in me, and physically me, my body, my identity here on earth. So this self-centeredness and this absurd practicality to just gather, to just have the excesses. Now, if we don't purge it out individually and collectively alike, well, the universe is gonna do it for us. Because we don't have any time left. 3 months and we have to change. And the reason I'm telling all of this, that is why these energies are so very intense and heavy and assertive, and they stir us up from every single perspective. For many people, it is almost like their own personal dimension of hell. But this is so very necessary because without this intensity, without these squares, without this tension, we cannot alchemize it into motivation. And all of these life lessons, existential lessons, and deep self-knowledge is not going to sink in. It has to sink in because that is the foundation of the future. I know that I said these things, this information over and over again like a broken record, but it is so very important that every time I get the chance, I have to repeat it, especially when Pluto, Mars, Saturn and Jupiter are so very active together. But let's move on to a different kind of energy, where just at the beginning of the week, Venus has entered into the sign of Virgo. Now, on one hand, Venus is debilitated here, so she cannot bring forward her very light-hearted, sensual, passionate, joy of life and love kind of qualities, her romance. But it is a really useful energy here because it is practical, it is commitment, it is taking things very, very seriously, it is embodying sense of duty. It is where value, worth, regardless of its nature, lies in stability, commitment, practicality, adaptability, and know-how. This is where your masteries, your skills, your knowledge, your routines, and all of your life experience, regardless from which perspective, job, work, personal, wisdom, etc., is the biggest blessing in our lives, and that is what makes us that much valuable, attractive, and it is a very strong problem-solving energy. And of course, Venus also, towards the end of the week, is going to be holding a trine, a celestial conversation of supreme harmony, with Uranus from Taurus, and this is very important because there is a powerful synergy now between these two planets, because Venus is the ruling planet of Taurus. So, Uranus is trining the governor of Taurus, and that represents really, really pleasant, unexpected surprises. Venus is all about money, currency, resources, especially in Virgo. Uranus is the planet of surprises, chaos, shock, rebellion. So this can mean either that someone offers you unexpected help, or some way or somehow you benefit either from good fortune, because Venus is the lower benefic, and Uranus triggers very, very quickly instant spontaneous manifestation. So it can be for example, a big display of good fortune or a miraculous kind of energy, when the heavens just offer you everything that you need. Now let's not forget Venus and Virgo, so it's not gonna be luxury, it's not gonna be excess, it's not gonna be more than you need, but it's gonna be like a saving grace. And where it sources from, it is a total surprise. It can be a person, it can be someone who you know, it can be someone who has a massive breakthrough in their own lives and they're gonna share it with you, for example. It can also be sheer good fortune, and it can also come through the internet, because Uranus is the governing planet of the internet. But at the same time, it can be a romantic surprise. I know that Venus in Virgo is not very romantic and not very sensual, but love can be expressed in so very many different ways. Let me just give you an example of how this energy can play out. Let's say that you're a single lady and been looking for love for a lot of time, but you have even given up on the possibility of having a partnership in your life, and you just live independently alone, and one day a pipe just explodes and you have no choice but to call a plumber. And you call the plumber, and that is Virgo, because it's practicality. It is a very practical need that you cannot simply ignore. And the plumber naturally comes and they evaluate the situation, and they tell you, well, the whole pipe system has to be changed, and the lady will be shocked because she might not have enough resources there and then. And the plumber says, oh, don't worry, I'm gonna do this for you because you're such a beautiful and kind-hearted lady. And not only is this a material help, but maybe this is how their relationship, their love story is gonna start out of a very practical need. But of course, this is just an example of how these two energies could mean love and romance, or a new relationship. But of course, let me give you a totally different kind of example. Let's say that you're an artist and you created a masterpiece, something that you really, really like, and you really depend on selling it because that is your source of income. And let's say you're not doing very well right now, and you go to a market or a bazaar or whatever, but no one really has any interest in your creation, and you're down because you really, really relied on that money. But you take your losses and decide to go home. And on your way home, someone, a bypasser, sees your painting and tells you, well, sir, I must have this because I just fallen in love with it. How much do you charge? That can be how Uranus and Venus trine play out. It can be a pleasant, unexpected, but also very practical surprise that fills in your needs. But this energy is going to more exact, so more influential towards the end of the week, where at the same time we also have a totally different kind of energy, but one which speaks about surprises. It is the quincunx, a minor astrological aspect held by the Sun and Neptune, and that can be a totally different kind of energy, where it is your fantasies, it is where your imagination, your inner emotional processes that can trigger very powerful manifestations. Especially if it is a person or something or someone done, or a role filled in by a person that you need in your life, because the Sun is in the sign of Libra, and that means partnerships. But of course, it doesn't have to be romantic whatsoever. It can be alliances, friendships, or simply someone performing something that you really, really need in your life, that kind of partnership. But since we also at the same time have this Venus Uranus trine, and Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, so it is also all about love, but love in its most highest expression as an unconditional soul level love. Well, the two energies together may actually start out like a karmic chain of events, where a practical need will somehow, one way or another, step by step, but in a rather quick way, so days, not like months and years, lead you to a romantic relationship which you really didn't expect in your life. And what the biggest surprise here is, you never expected for you to be so happy and so in love. So yes, absolutely, there is a lot of doom and gloom, hardship, violence, like serious physical problems in the sky. This is where the old order is already crumbling. This is where governments, politicians, everything is in very, very big trouble. But you see, at the same time, there is also love, compassion, solidarity, and destiny playing its course in the air. So it doesn't always have to be doom and gloom. The best coping mechanism is, like, ignorance right now is definitely not an option. But not being ignorant doesn't mean immersing deeply and passionately into the drama and the turmoil. We observe it, as in, we take note of what's going on and what that can mean for us personally, but detach. Of course, if we're talking about fated energies, there is also a very strong opposition in the sky. And this is really bad news, because Mercury is in the sign of Scorpio, so it immediately activates our unconscious power, the subconscious, our repressed memories, the feelings, nostalgic moments, all the stored information in our brains, even physically. And it opposes its higher octave, Uranus, which is the symbol of the highest cerebral activities. So when these two planets speak in this manner, well, there's no telling what Uranus can trigger out of us. This is where everything that we have done in our lives can out of nowhere spontaneously come out and haunt us. This is where we go out walking on the street and a smell or an image or a color or a writing or anything triggers back memories. It can also mean deja vus. It can also mean recalling past lives. So from a psychological perspective, especially mentally, the mental sphere, we're not going to be very, very stable. We have to expect randomness, a little bit of chaos, and that things are basically going to have their own way of evolving. Basically, this is where even the inner world will have a mind of its own, and it will not take our commands at all. But this is just the more humorous and lighter expression, because the heavier expression of this energy, well, that is secret. That is very, very powerful, impactful, life-changing secrets coming out. Those secrets can be purely personal, but it can also be sourced from other people. For example, long secrets kept and guarded by friends, relatives, etc. So for many people, this will be a period of maximum shock. But outside the individual sphere, well, it's very obvious how this is going to play out on the world stage. It means disclosures, revelations, especially when these disclosures are going to happen by accident, or from within, as in an act of treachery and backstabbing, an inner battle, amongst the secret keepers, so to speak. But another layer of this energy, it might not have to do that much with psychology and our inner worlds and secrets, etc. But it can really, really mess up our electronic devices, our internet connection, our communication devices. Websites may crash, informational attacks, computer viruses, cyber, anything that has to do with cyberspace that is assertive, negative, comes as an attack, can just influence our lives. The sites of banks, online bankings may crash. And of course, Mercury is in shadow, and we can expect Mercury to go retrograde very soon. So if you have elections or anything that has to do with like serious paperwork, even if it's electronic, well, expect confusion, expect breakdown, expect errors, bugs, problems. In other words, expect the unexpected. Now for other people, especially who are very, very sensitive to Uranus, this can trigger like strong anxiety without no rational explanation. It can just awaken your nervous system to all times high. This also heavily influences the Schumann resonance, so it is not only us people, but animals may react in a very unusual way. This is also the energy of medical errors, when certain medical experiments or treatments backfire. So we can see a lot of mediatic turmoil about, the medical industry. And last but not least, this can also mean certain man-made accidents, which can do a lot of damage and a lot of harm, especially environmental disaster or harm to nature. But at the same time, Mercury and Uranus opposing each other. This recalls November last year, when Mars was in this position in its home sign of Scorpio, and it opposed Uranus from Taurus, and that was exactly when the problems began in the Wuhan laboratories. So Mercury is the planet of the mind, information, communication. So put 2 and 2 together. Maybe we will find out the truth of what happened and how the coronavirus situation came into existence. And since Mercury is going to go retrograde in this part of the sky, so the opposition with Uranus is going to be on and off, this subject is going to be discussed at least for the next month. And then finally, on the 9th of the month, the Mars and Pluto now direct square is going to be exact. Now personally, that can represent a very strong battle to reclaim your power, to fight for your independence, to make sure that other people don't have a negative and toxic influence on you. So there can be a lot of conflicts, battles in relationship or in organizations, for example, because that will be a moment when it will trigger sabotage and backstabbing inside of centralized power. But it can also play out in our own individual lives as well, where we might fight with our life partners, friends, family, etc. for power, for respect, for equality. But from a physical perspective, this is a little bit dangerous, I am not going to lie. Pluto and Mars speaking and perfecting the square like this, that does have the energy of destruction and death on it. So it can mean yet another explosion. It can mean like really violent civil war. It can mean the usage of weapons, mass destruction weapons, or at least a massive threat. It can mean the deterioration of diplomatic relationship. It can mean some kind of war one way or another, or explosions, or a destructive power of the element of fire. But I know that many people think of me as a doomy gloomy astrologer who only speaks of death and negativity, so I'm not gonna focus that much more on this, but what needs to be said, needs to be said. And if all of that wasn't enough, the cherry on top is on the 11th, when on one hand, the Sun squares Jupiter, so all of this is going to be amplified, magnified by Jupiter, and that means that diplomatic relations and the economic climate is going to suffer greatly. But that's not the star of the show. It is the Grand Cardinal Cross. That is the energy of maximum tension, where we are immersed even on a soul level, because one of the power players is the Moon from the sign of Cancer, her home sign, opposing the Capricorn planets, where Saturn is also in his home sign of Capricorn, so that is extremely strong. And then Mars is going to oppose the Sun, Mars from his home sign of Aries, and the Sun debilitated in Libra. And then all of these planets are going to be connected with squares, so aspects of tension. Now this is like the explosion of a psychological bomb. If there was an ideal astrological moment for uprising, protests, when we can no longer tolerate anything that challenges us, anything that agitates us, anything that restricts us. Well, this is the day. So by the end of next week, things are gonna get really, really, really tense on the world stage, but also in our individual lives as well. But I am positive and I am totally confident that most of us have enough self-discipline and wisdom to not get immersed into either a personal drama or the drama playing out on the world stage. So I do believe that we are, as individuals, those who embody wisdom and they have an open mind and a basic sense of rationality, they are not gonna get immersed into any of this, and neither they're gonna start fights, conflicts with anyone. May they be physical fights, ideological battles, mediatic battles on social media, etc. I think that this is the time when we're gonna do what the moon in Cancer does best. Stay inside the protective shell and just watch. Well, this concludes your horoscope. Unfortunately, it is a little bit doomy and gloomy, but this is the truth. This is my interpretation. This is the way I see things. And I'm not saying this to praise myself or my work or anything like that. Quite the contrary. I am someone who doesn't really care about my worth and stuff like that. But if you listen through all my horoscopes in 2020, well, all the doom and gloom that I have said actually has played out on the world stage almost like clockwork. So again, I apologize for not delivering the very, very best of news, but we can cope. Reality is what we make of it, and if we detach and just observe and not get into the drama, it doesn't have to be negative whatsoever for us personally, because if we embody self-care, self-love, and just mind our own business in the sense that we just follow our soul path and what we came here to do, and not get involved in the rest. Of course, as I said, this doesn't mean ignorance, this just means detachment. And from a karmic perspective, now think about it. If it's not part of your destiny and your soul mission, if you get involved, you're gonna take someone else's place whose soul mission it is to be there. So don't let anyone make you feel guilty that you're a coward or whatever they can tell you. Well, it is not your reality, it is not your world. At the end of the day, your soul mission is more important to you than this masquerade, this global illusion. So don't let anyone manipulate you and trick you into doing things that you're really not comfortable doing, because it is not part of your story. Most of us are here as observers regarding the deconstruction of centralized power, and what we do actively is change ourselves. For example, stop supporting big pharma, stop supporting big companies. That is the wisest way to fight, because if you take away their support and resources, then you condemn them to death. And that's about it. That is the wise way of doing it. So always listen to your inner voice and your gut feeling, and don't let things which simply do not resonate with you and don't belong to your soul mission trigger you. Thank you again for listening. Wish everyone a blessed and safe week. Please stay out of the drama. Until next time, bye for now.